and that is Chief Walther, W-A-L-T-H-E-R. And we will be taking questions afterwards, but not too many since everything is still happening right now and it's under investigation. Chief Walther?
Thank you, Sergeant Semsis. A bit after 5:30 tonight, my officers were in the process of following what was reported to us as a stolen vehicle out of the city of Phoenix. In preparation to stop that vehicle, they came to the intersection of Scottsdale Road and Cactus, where they attempted a traffic stop on that vehicle. Immediately on that vehicle stopping, they were met with gunfire from the sole occupant, what we now know is the sole occupant of that vehicle. Multiple rounds fired from that suspect. Both officers in that traffic attempted felony stop fired their duty weapons multiple times, and the suspect is currently deceased inside the vehicle. It took us some time to clear traffic out and get to the suspect, but we did find him deceased in the vehicle. And so originally for us, that stolen vehicle information came from the city of Phoenix, and for us on a automatic license plate reader network that we have here in Scottsdale, and picked that up as a reported stolen vehicle. The thing to discuss here for me really is, back in January of last year, I asked a question when one of my special assignments unit sergeants was shot. Many of you were probably there, and we've discussed it since then. But for me, I'm going to ask the question again: when did this become okay? Right? And if you think about in terms of over the last 14 months for Scottsdale Police, I've had 4 different officer-involved shootings, each where the suspect shot at us, and so we wound up returning fire. And thankfully, Sergeant Galbraith recovered from his injuries, but we continue to see this over and over and over again, where my officers are being shot at. And so it's a discussion that I'd like to continue to get started. Too many out there look at life as a game of Grand Theft Auto. Stolen vehicle, police are behind you. Now I'm going to start engaging the police with gunfire on a city street at rush hour. These are human beings. I know it's easy to look at police officers and say, well, they're just doing their job, right? They're just police officers. No, these are flesh and blood human beings that have families and children. This isn't a game. This isn't a game. This has real life consequences. And so the consequences are, I have 2 officers shot at today. Neither one of them is injured, and that's what's important to talk about. But now I have a suspect who's shot and killed during an exchange of gunfire on a busy city street. And so we have to ask questions about that. I'm happy to take questions, but I want you to understand that, if you look at your watches right now, we're sitting at about 2.5 hours after the shots were fired just down the street from me. And so there's some things that I'm going to talk about. There's some things I'm not. I'm not going to talk about the suspect's name because, quite frankly, I don't have that yet. I didn't ask that of my violent crimes unit sergeant because at the moment, that's not something I want to discuss. I want to talk about the bravery of, again, 2 police officers who were met with immediate gunfire, returned gunfire, and are alive today because of some great training. So I'll take some questions and we'll go from there.
Can you walk us through the scene of how this all unfolded at this point of what you know so far?
Sure. So ultimately, like I said, we get a hit on our automatic license plate reader system of a stolen vehicle that's reported out of the city of Phoenix.
So
reported out of the city of Phoenix.
The SUV or the car?
Yeah, so it's traveling, right, it is traveling northbound and ultimately sets up for a westbound turn in the left-hand turn lane. The officers, one patrol officer in a marked vehicle and another officer in an unmarked vehicle, but with clear markings, lights and siren. So they attempt to make that traffic stop while he comes to a stop at the intersection. There's nobody in front of him at the time, so they attempt to make a traffic stop. I'll tell you what's important is time and distance, right? They have set up at the right distance, what we'll call a felony car stop. And so they set themselves at a good distance behind him, which ultimately that training saves your life. That time and distance is really important. So they set up for that traffic stop. They turn on their overhead lights. That car comes to a stop. They come to a stop. Driver is out immediately and firing from a handgun. And so they then put themselves in the right position to return fire. And ultimately, like I said, the suspect is deceased in the vehicle right now.
How long have those officers been on the force for you, and then had they been in similar situations like this?
So I can give you some idea. I won't go into their history on officer-involved shootings. I can tell you that one of them is very senior, and one of them is a little bit more junior. than the other. But both well-trained, well-seasoned officers in the Scottsdale Police Department.
Were there other cars in the intersection at the time?
Well, as you can imagine, 5:30, right? So there are a lot of cars in all directions at Scottsdale Road and Cactus. But when they decided to make the stop was the best time for them to make the stop with no other vehicles directly in front of them at the time. And so in that turn lane. So good time to make the stop, but there were a lot of other vehicles in all four directions.
Do you need anything from the public when it comes to dash camera or any witness information?
That's a great question. Certainly, we always are interested in that information. If you've got great video, then we'd be interested in that. I will tell you that we also have great video, as all of you know. All my officers wear on body cameras. We have a real-time crime center with a lot of great camera footage of a lot of our intersections, or the vast majority of our intersections. So we have great video that we know of already, but certainly if there's video out there that you think could be helpful to the investigation, we certainly wouldn't turn that down. We happily accept that.
How much longer will the scene remain active for drivers to know to avoid
Sure.
this area?
As you can imagine, when there's a death involved and a use of force of this magnitude, when we're shot at and we have to return fire, the investigation is going to be several hours. So the intersection of Scottsdale Road and Cactus in all directions will be shut down for the next several hours to come, probably deep into the early morning hours.
Will there be another agency investigating the use of force in this case?
No, we'll be doing this, as you know, and we get a lot of questions about that. We are in the process statewide of transitioning to having other agencies review or investigate officer-involved shootings, and we're almost there. In fact, we're going to start in the East Valley with East Valley Critical Incident Response Team in July of this year.
Were the officers shooting from inside their vehicles, and was the suspect also shooting from inside the stolen vehicle?
Sorry, so I'm not going to go into position because I only want to give you the most up-to-date information, and so I don't have their current positions of where they are. I do have some good video of that, and I know that the suspect initially came out of the vehicle shooting. So he wasn't initially, what it appears so far is he wasn't initially shooting from inside the vehicle. He absolutely got out of the vehicle and started firing rounds in the direction of both officers. And I will tell you, just as a bit of evidence, that both officers' vehicles have been struck by gunfire.
Do you know how many shots were fired at the officers?
I do not.
Were any other vehicles hit by bullets?
We have one citizen reporting that their vehicle has a bullet strike, and so we're looking into that right now and investigating that to see if that's from this shooting.
Do they have any time? Do officers have any time to give this man a direction?
No. He literally, when his vehicle stopped, he's out and shooting.
Because the initial call came from Phoenix PD, from what I understand. Are they involved in the investigation at all?
No, and if I did, maybe I misspoke, because I believe what we had was a reported stolen vehicle out of the city of Phoenix. Now what happens is when we get that information, usually that'll be picked up on one of our license plate reader cameras in our network here in Scottsdale. A lot of agencies and a lot of cities have the license plate readers. And so as soon as that stolen vehicle is entered into this system, it'll start populating or popping stolen vehicles, and that popped up as a stolen vehicle into our real-time crime center through our automatic license plate reader camera system.
Was the vehicle stolen today, do you know?
I don't know that. All we know is that it was reported stolen, and that's what we were following up on.
You talked a little bit about it, Chief. Obviously, this could have been a much more dangerous situation. How lucky or how thankful are you that, despite everything that happened, that your two officers are going home tonight and that no one else was injured or hurt as a result of this?
I think that is the question. You ask probably the best question, because all of us can get into the idea of details, right? Details of evidence and details of what exactly happened and why was the gunman firing upon my officers initially. But the conversation we should be having is how what's the emotional toll? Somebody asked me that the other day in a interview is, Chief, what's the emotional toll of when you're connected to your people, when you're connected to officers, you believe in the mission, you really take to heart the idea of protect and serve. What's the emotional toll? And so your question, I think, really hits the point, I think, very importantly, and that is when I'm driving to where my officers are, because typically we move our officers from the scene, that emotional toll starts to rack up, and it is, thank God my officers are okay. How are our citizenry? You know, because that's the other question we have. We talk about the safety of the officers. We talk about the suspect and their actions or their status, in this case deceased. But what about the citizens that are often caught in the crossfire? I shared with all of you back in November when my special assignments unit got involved in a shooting in Mesa in front of a Mexican restaurant, that the suspect fired on full automatic a 30-round magazine, spraying it at them with no regard whatsoever for the people in that parking lot, for the people in that restaurant. And here again, we have the same thing, with cars everywhere, and still somebody coming out shooting with absolutely no regard. That's the issue that I see. That's the issue that we need to have a conversation on. You will see folks glom onto this idea, and this is going to be controversial, but I at least want to discuss it. I hear a lot of discussion about the gun violence problem that we have in this country. I would submit to you, just for your thought process, that we don't have a gun violence problem. We have a violence problem. We have a behavior problem, and that's just the implement that many choose to pick up and employ against police officers, against our fellow citizens and residents and business owners. And so it's just the will to be in the middle of traffic and pull out a firearm and just start shooting at the police. And I brought up the idea of video games, or the idea of Grand Theft Auto. Hey, I get it. My adult children started playing that when it first came out as well. But when you glorify the idea of stealing cars and shooting at the police, and then is it any wonder why we're standing here again? Like I said, 4th time in the last 14 months that Scottsdale police officers have been shot at and had to return fire to defend themselves. And sadly, now we have another person deceased, another suspect deceased in a vehicle because of their actions. That's what's important. We respond to their actions. And my officers did so again tonight. And great question, because I breathe a sigh of relief that both of those officers are going home to their families to serve another day. To serve another day in this community, in the larger community, not just Scottsdale, but the Valley community, to serve another day. And that's what's important. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to take their time off, and they're going to suit back up, and they're going to come right back out and do it again.
For clarification,
Yep.
he jumps out of the car, starts shooting, but he's deceased inside the car.
So there was exchange of gunfire. He immediately returned he returned to cover inside the vehicle, and that's where he is deceased.
Have you heard from those officers today how they're doing
Yep.
emotionally?
In fact, before I came here, I met with both of them. I will tell you honestly, it's important to me to be extremely connected to my folks. The senior officer I know very well. I started in Scottsdale PD 30 years ago this year, and so I know him very well. My goal is very simple, kind of what you talked about. My goal is very simple. As soon as I see him, they get a hug from me. Glad you're okay. I'm glad you were there. And that's what they get from me. And so that's important to let them know that we're connected, that we're there to help them through this time. Because if we're honest with each other, any officer involved shooting, you get in any significant use of force, there's always trauma there. I like to say that nobody gets off this big blue marble alive or without trauma. So there's trauma there, and the quicker we can step in, provide some peer support and some help and a hug from the chief, sorry, you're getting it whether you want it or not.
All right, Chief, I think 1 or 2 more questions.
Okay. Anything else?
All right.
Thanks all for being here. I really appreciate it. You really share the message, and that partnership is important, so thank you.
We don't have any more updates at this time. Once we do and more of the investigation is complete, if you follow us on our social media, we will also be sending out information on there. So thank you, and thank you for your patience tonight.